Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm Steven, and today we are joined by two of the primary retailers, I would say, in this country for tabletop games. We have Patrick Day over here from Uncle's Games.
Hello.
We have Travis Severance from Millennium Games.
Hi.
And today we're going to be discussing, can the local game store survive?
All right, so earlier this week, we're at the GAMA trade show here, which is why we're all gathered. But we went to the ICV2 panel, and we also used some of their data in the State of Tabletop podcast we did a month or two back. And one of the things that you can just easily see if you've been looking at the past 7-8 years of tabletop games, it's been growing like crazy.
Yep.
And so along with that growth, we've seen a lot of pressure on the local game store happening, whether it be from the mass market retailers getting in, more stores opening up because of the success of tabletop games, or Kickstarter games that are going directly to consumer and skipping the retailers.
Classic Amazon, trying to get involved, get their cut.
Yeah, and so we brought on two people here. We have basically the West Coast. Patrick is Uncle's Games. You guys have what?
We have 5 stores in Washington State.
Tell me a little bit about your history and how you got here.
How I got here?
To this very room.
Pretty crazy, actually. I was working at a vocational school in Africa, and my goal when I came back was to open my own local game store. And I sent an email to Uncle's Games, which I thought had the format I wanted to do. And I said, hey, I want to come work for you guys for a couple of years, and then I'm going to go leave and open my own store. And
very candid of you.
Yeah, I wanted to be honest. I didn't want to be like, So I was very honest with them. And then 6 months later, they were like, well, instead of opening your own store, because the Uncle's has been around since 1978. There's a much older ownership. And so they wanted to transition into younger ownership. So they offered me a partnership.
That's awesome.
And so every year I'm gaining more and more shares and kind of starting to move into more leadership with the company. So yeah.
And now you guys, I know Uncle's Games, you do things a little differently, right? You have a different angle on this
we
model?
are in malls mostly, and we focus definitely on what we call kind of the gateway. We like to brag that we create gamers. So we interact daily with, I've only played Monopoly, I've only played Risk, and we take them to the next level.
That's awesome.
We sell Magic and all that kind of stuff, but we generally have very flat prize structure and that kind of stuff, and it's generally very family oriented. And so usually what I've found is we'll even open a store in a new area and everybody's kind of looking at us askew, the other local game stores. But within a year or two, we've created new players
So they love
who
you.
think our prize structure sucks. And so they leave and go to their stores, and that's totally fine with us. So we actually, within Washington State, there are many, many people who all discovered gaming through Uncle's Games.
That's
so
awesome.
It's pretty cool.
That's really cool. And so we also have Travis. You're with Millennium Games from New York, and you do things a little differently. So tell us about how you got here and kind of Millennium's take on the tabletop retail store.
So I came into the industry, I was working at finance, doing mortgages, and I hated it. And I got into playing a little more Warhammer, so I started working part-time for the store that I own now. And I was part-time for a little while, and then I added a little bit more, and then I added a little bit more. So I was in a similar space. My thought was, I'll come in and I'll work part-time, and I'll kind of learn this industry. And what I'll do is, because the store's kind of running loosey-goosey, I'll just open up my own store. And then the point-of-sale system went down. The former owner said, hey, would you like to take a more active approach on this thing? So I went in and kind of helped him set up the point-of-sale system, and then I went through the process of managing some more stuff internally, and he actually did some playtesting for Upper Deck, so he was gone for a little while, and he kind of had me take over the store during that period of time, and I did pretty well. Fast forward 8 years from that, I got in the position where I could buy the store from him, and I did, and now I've owned it for 8 years. The way we do it a little differently is we're just a single store location, but we're 12,000 square feet.
And that's huge for New York.
Yeah, it's pretty massive. I mean, I'm upstate, so I'm not downstate. Rent is still significant for us, but we've added on. We've done renovations 2 times to the store to add more space to it, so it's gotten bigger and bigger to kind of meet the needs of what our customers need. But we can seat comfortably 165 Magic players. We've got a private play space. We've got a little over 2,800 board games that we sell, miniatures games, role-playing games. Disc golf is massive for us. And role-playing is big too. So we touch all the bases. There's not a ton of stores in the area, so what we do is we try to address every type of player. So our event calendar is kind of scheduled in a way where we've got some casual events. where the night is kind of the casual players, and then we've also got some competitive stuff as well, where there's higher end prizes. So we try to make sure that we got something for everybody. But yeah, we do a lot of that gateway stuff too. We have a lot of events that are just come in, check out some games. If you make some purchases, cool. But we're just trying to, open everybody up to the idea of what tabletop gaming looks like, analog interaction, like, put the digital stuff down, have some face-to-face time with stuff, and do that as best we can.
That's awesome. So we have basically, Uncle's is spread out in the community, right? In places with high traffic, trying to really focus on the early part of the experience, right? Getting people in. Whereas Millennium is in a place where you're the main thing.
Yep.
There's not a lot of other options, and you're trying to offer the whole experience.
Absolutely, yeah.
From top to bottom, 12,000 square feet of just tabletop glory.
Yeah, we looked at other larger mass market retailers and the way that they kind of did it, and we have the benefit of having Wegmans, which is like one of the greatest grocery stores in the world, and I just kind of looked at what they did, and they added a pharmacy in, and then they added some other different services to their members that were there, and then they grew their sections based on what was popular. So when organic got really popular, they got big. So I said, let me try to apply that to my business as well. As things start to shift and events became more of a focus, we're going to need more play space. We're going to be able to house more things. Okay, miniatures is a big deal. That takes up more space than a card player does. So we need to be able to address those needs. So we've kind of evolved and adapted based on what we've seen from the market and what they've wanted for us.
That's really cool.
Travis, tell me, do you have an online component to the business?
So we have a very small online component. The majority of the stuff that we do online is selling singles, and occasionally we'll sell boxed games, but I don't sell anything that's a boxed game for under MSRP. Nice. So if a boxed game is hard to find, we'll occasionally put that online, but I reserve enough copies for my local community, so they all buy at regular MSRP. Even when something's harder to find, we tend to attract a lot of customers that way, and we'll move some of that product online for a higher than regular return on that.
Yeah.
The rest of the stuff that we move is collectibles maybe that have died off, and then most of that, actually, the singles and the stuff that we sell online is just used for us to do acquisition so that we can stock the cases in the front of our store.
Yeah.
So it's a small component, maybe 5% of our overall gross is online.
What about you? Does Uncle's have any online?
We don't. We actually did have online very early in the online market, and it did very well. And then it just started to tank. And I think the reason it tanked, my theory, is that people stopped going to Google and searching for board games, and they started just going directly to Amazon.
Sure.
And so as that started to go downhill, we kind of just decided to cut loose on that. That was about 5 years ago when I was just kind of coming into the company. And I mean, it has actually been a healthy decision for us personally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, we focus completely on just the brick and mortar side.
Well, and the online seems kind of out of place for what you're about.
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
In the first place.
Patrick, all right, let's start with you.
Yeah.
What do you think? Have you felt the pressure over these past years with all these things moving in?
So the thing about this industry, as we all know at this table, is it is constantly changing. It is constantly at flux, and so you're constantly trying to guess. It's like navigating rapids at all times. You're trying to look down the river and kind of figure out, where do I need to position myself? So yeah, we're definitely feeling the pressure. There's a lot of change going on in the industry, the most obvious one being a lot of the acquisition, consolidation happening at the publisher level, and what that means for us as stores, and even like our ability to leverage our own business with those publishers, because as publishers get bigger, every store becomes kind of smaller in their eyes. So that's definitely, I guess, one challenge. And then also, like, we have stores in the Seattle area, and cost of living is extremely high in that area. And so that is always definitely a challenge for us. We also have stores in Spokane, and so we kind of have the balance, but definitely in the Seattle area, that's a challenge we're always fighting, because as we also know, it's, we're not in clothing or anything, like margins aren't super high on this product. So, and I definitely believe in trying to pay my employees, a decent wage and everything. So trying to find those balances is tough right now, for sure.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think that's balanced out by, I almost feel like, because I'm trying to think of an example. What was the MSRP on like Gloomhaven?
149
before it went crazy, right?
Yeah.
So like one thing I always think about, we're in Tulsa, so we're Midwest, right? And like the cost of living in Tulsa is like one of the lowest in the country, probably. But at the same time, right, like the cost of an iPad in Tulsa is the same as is it in Seattle.
Sure.
And so like the average pay of people, the economics of the situation on like a $40 course set in Oklahoma would probably be like someone buying a $60 or $70 course set in Seattle or New York.
Yep. Definitely see that contrast between our Spokane stores and our Seattle stores. Absolutely.
Yeah. Travis, what about you? So you've probably seen some pressure over these past few years. What's the general consensus on your end for the future?
So it's deciding what to do with that pressure, right? So the pressure that we get a lot of times is pricing. I just I can't offer the pricing that's available through other outlets. So how do I approach that challenge first and foremost? Because with a bigger space, people walk into our store most of the time, and there's no question that it's a business. This is a game store. You guys sell games primarily. This is a real retail operation. You've got adequate stock. You've got staff that gives great customer service. And the expectation of the consumer when they walk into a retail store these days are pretty high, and they continue to grow. So the consumer want is a really nice space, great customer service, instant checkout, and the best pricing we can find. All of that stuff doesn't match up. Like, something there has to give a little bit. So if I'm going to have a great space, and I'm going to have beautiful displays, and I'm going to have stock, and I'm going to have super staff that's very attentive and quick checkouts, I have to make a certain amount of money to be able to pay for those things. And I understand the convenience of, like, it's difficult to work in a market where everything on my shelf you can find for 30% cheaper, and you can click a button on your phone and have it in 2 days.
And not even have to go to the store.
It just shows up at your, it's funny because last year at GAMA when we were in Las Vegas, a friend of mine who's a publisher needed something for his booth. And we went in to have lunch. And by the time we were done with lunch, somebody had delivered from Amazon to our lunch table what he had ordered. That is a very
4-hour delivery.
Yeah. So this is the kind of stuff that you try to compete with. So there's a couple of different ways that we do it. We address some of the pricing things by we have a consistent sale table that's there. One of the big issues in the industry right now, it's kind of this embarrassment of wealth. We have so many titles that are coming out. So how do you choose? And inevitably, some of them are going to sell well and some of them aren't. So we have a consistent sale table where the more price-conscious consumers, they'll kind of go in there and see what they can get. And used board games has been a massive growth area for us. With as many people buying as many board games as there are, inevitably, their closet space is limited. And we had a section of the store that could fit that. So we have another mode where those shoppers can come in, they can take the board games that they aren't playing anymore, they can turn those into real dollars in the store and either buy new releases, or they can look at buying some of the used stuff. And the interesting thing about the used end of it is a lot of those things aren't games that are readily available through distribution, or maybe they haven't been in the last 5 years. So there's a bunch of treasures that are there that they haven't seen on a shelf. Now somebody's played it, but it's an opportunity to be able to sell something that isn't readily available that gives us kind of this unique value proposition when they come in our store. They can't necessarily find that online because it hasn't been in print in 3 years. Oh, you've got that copy, great. So there's different ways where we've chosen to address pricing, which at the stage that we're at is the biggest hurdle that we have. I've got massive event space. I've got 11 demo tables in my store that are active with new games to show people when they walk in the door, and we rotate those on a monthly basis. So there's experiential retail they have every 30 days because those get rotated, so it's like a brand new tour through the hottest stuff in board gaming. So there's a lot of different things that we address. The biggest point, I can't have that facility and then be able to compete on price the way that other people can.
Well, I mean, traditionally the argument has been over, even since we were growing up in the industry and actually going to stores as 13 and 14-year-olds, the expectation has always been pay full MSRP at your local store because that's where you meet people, that's where you play, that's where the community is, that's where the value is being offered. Do you think that argument is still holding with customers? And is that actually still the case? That they feel a loyalty to support the store?
So we've taken upon ourselves, we have a customer loyalty program that we've had up and going for the last 7 or 8 years. So there's a small amount of advantages that customers that shop with us consistently end up getting. We'll do splash sales for them. Sometimes there's exclusive events that we invite them to, different things like that. They end up getting to the head of the line when they have some of that stuff, and it's volume based. But there's a little bit that we address there. I think the challenging part for us is we have customers that come in and we spend a lot of time working on them, and we spend a lot of time showing them the industry and introducing them to great games and stuff. And then after a while, when they turn from kind of just somebody who's a casual gamer to moving to the next level, they do the same thing that anybody else does in a hobby. They look at the money and the time that they're spending and say, I only make this much money, like this hobby is becoming more of a thing for me as far as expenses go, I've got to find a way to shave those. So even if I can continue to offer them the same amount of service and the same selection, I will inevitably lose them when they start getting more price conscious as their purchasing goes up. So it's the only industry that I've ever worked in where the harder I've worked and the better I've done my job, the more likely I am to kind of lose some of those consumers naturally.
That's like you were talking about earlier, where you graduate people into
and they go off to the other stores, right? And like they still come back, right? Because inevitably there's stuff that we end up having. Like supply is a big part of what we do, so we take pretty significant buying positions on games that we think are winners. So inevitably we get a lot of those shoppers that come in when they can't find something that's the new hotness because it's just evaporated, and we take a large buying position. So they still come around, but yeah, I mean, our bread and butter is our loyal customers that come in, on a weekly basis and a monthly basis and stuff. I mean, we're in business because we have the store's been in that location for 30 plus years. We have regular customers that are in all the time, and people that I've seen grow up, and now their kids are getting into games too. Cool. So I've gone through that whole cycle. So
that's a fun.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
What about you, Patrick? Are you feeling that as well? That
for online,
the customer loyalty, just this idea that there's kind of an ingrained, the LGS should be supported and I should be paying full price and I'm okay with that. Does that exist?
I think if you're running an LGS, you have to attack that head on. Like you can't just assume that's going to take care of itself. So for example, we also run a loyalty program. Another key way that I found almost accidentally that's actually helped us a lot with competing online is that I have one employee who literally all he does basically is go into schools and boys and girls clubs and those sorts of things and runs events. And you quickly gain like parent loyalty that way. Like parents are like, you came into my kid's school and you taught them these games. Like I'm a customer for life. So that's an interesting dynamic that kind of generated just because we want to be more involved in the community. And then I think part of it is just a human connection. Like I'm sure all of your regulars know you, Travis.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that definitely has a power. That has a power to create that. I think the biggest issue for us online that I find is availability. Usually I find at least a lot of our customers will buy the thing if it's there, but if it's not there, then they will buy it online.
Sure.
And so the price thing is definitely an issue, but also a bigger issue a lot of times I find I'm running into is just it's online in stock and it's not in stock to us. And that's always just all feel bad, right, for us as retailers.
Sure.
So that's definitely a dynamic. Interestingly enough, I benefit in a lot of ways from online sales because a lot of my customers work for a company called Amazon. So that generates some revenue for me.
Yeah.
Well, it's great that the people working at Amazon are ordering or buying product from you.
Absolutely.
In lieu of that. Just a fact. So, I mean, I think one of the changes that happened, right, is in the 80s and 90s, part of the value that a retailer brought to the table was just having the product in the first place.
Sure.
So, like, when I was a kid, like, you couldn't buy online, right? So, when you wanted Pokemon packs, that's the first game I got into when I was little.
Yeah.
And it was like, I would beg my mom to take me to the local game store. Because, we grew up in a really small town, about 45 minutes away from what you guys would consider a small town that we live in now. The city of Tulsa.
We call it a city.
But, we had to drive 45 minutes, and so, like, if she was going to going to town, as we called it, I'd be like, want to go, and then, like, the whole time trying to convince her to stop off so I can buy my $10 packs. But that changed, right? Online, that's one of the big pressures that switched, it meant that the retailer can't offer value by just having the stock. Because even you were saying, it's like, if you don't have stock, it's a problem. It's like, that's one of the main things a retailer should be doing. Right. Is making sure they have stock, which you take the big buying positions on.
Absolutely.
But another thing that has been shifting, one of the big major changes recently, you're talking about the consolidation of the publishers, but we've seen a lot of publishers making moves with MAP, minimum advertised price, which is, I remember not that long ago, X-Wing as an example. So $15 for an X-Wing ship, which is a pre-painted miniature, pre-assembled with all the stat cards and all the stuff. It's $15 MSRP. And for a long time, it was $10.
Yeah.
That was the actual price that you paid. Yeah. So if you're buying, $100 in ships, it's actually like $60. And so people buying it at a local game store is it really like, are you offering enough value that I'm willing to pay $40 extra for my thing?
Sure, right.
But the question I have, and I would love to get both of your takes on it, because we talk all the time, obviously, me and Steven, but how much impetus is on the retailer to offer value and the publisher to make sure that the price and value of their product is not just getting tanked? As an example, with X-Wing, right, it's like the publisher is allowing people to buy it and sell it online for $10.
Sure.
And so I don't know that there's enough value for a retailer to offer. So it's kind of a two-part question, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, how do you offer that much value, and how much of this is on the publisher to make sure that the prices of these products isn't just getting sniped?
So it's a tough balancing act in a free market environment, right? MAP is a thing that a lot of retailers look at and think that it's a very positive thing. I kind of take a dubious approach to it in that it is conceptually good, but when there's larger retailers out there that violate that, be it your mass market that have workarounds, or even now, X-Wing's a great example. There's a map on it right now. The cheapest you can sell it is $3 off on a $15 ship. But the online retailers can skirt around that by making it so that the price at checkout changes to whatever they want.
Can't show $10 at
They
catalog,
have
but
to,
you go to
they
checkout.
have to, they have to show the proper map up front, and then when you go to checkout, wait till checkout, and then there's a different pricing there.
Yeah.
So there's just these workarounds that they have in space for that.
Well, and
So-
part of the problem there is that I'm pretty sure what they can't do is dictate the pricing.
Right.
Because it's like
Absolutely
price
not.
fixing.
Nope.
Like
Can't do
there's
it.
a legal thing they can't do.
Can't do
So
it.
that's another challenge, because if publishers could say, hey, you can't sell this product unless you're selling it at
Right.
X. But they can't do that.
Nope, they can't do
They
that.
actually
Now they
can't
can
go into
choose.
that.
They can choose who their buying partners are going to be. They
Yeah.
can choose the way that their signers work. I mean, it's interesting, right? So,
Yeah.
so if we look at a company like Apple, Apple does it in a very different way than what our industry can do it in, which they say, you have to buy your products from us if you're going to be one of our authorized seller at full cost, and then what we'll do is we'll give you a coupon back for the difference in what your savings is. So the onus to discount any of their products is pretty minimal, right? Because it's just going to cost you, and you have to pay that stuff up front. Our industry just would collapse if we tried to do that. I think there's spaces where people could look at doing something like that, but again, it's really hard to try to regulate that. I think finding ways to do brand protection is interesting, and each company kind of has to find their own solution that's going to work for them. I mean, one company can't go in and decide to copy another company's policy on that, because it's relational collusion. Even if they didn't have the same conversation, if they get in there and they decide that their contract is going to be written the same as the other one and they're just going to change the names and such, that could be something that they could end up getting in legal trouble for. So what do we do? Well, I just continue to try to do it the way that I've been doing it before, and realize that no matter how good the store is, no matter how good my stock is, no matter how good my event space are, I'm just not going to be the right fit for everybody. And those numbers change every year, and online shopping grows to a certain percentage every year, and so on and so forth. So there's just some customers that would come to the register and say, there's just no reason why I'm going to shop for you, because the only thing that's going to define why I buy from you is the price.
That's not your customer.
That's not I can't make that guy happy.
Yeah.
I can't make that person happy, but it's the same with anything else, right? If I go to Volkswagen and I test drive all their cars, maybe I just don't fit the seat.
Yeah.
No matter what they offer me for a
Or
price
you don't like
or
the shape of the
savings,
car, right? Like, it doesn't matter what
Yeah,
it is.
it's just not going to work all the time.
Patrick, do you have any
Thoughts on
that?
map? So we had this conversation. I'm very similar to Travis in that I think map conceptually is great, but I have yet to see enforceability. Like, I've yet to see anybody be able to truly enforce it in a way that really works, to be honest. And you're just talking about like buying online, and then there's that price savings, and then also it seems like a lot of the mass market just ignore it, and because it's such a huge buy for the publisher, they look the other way, or that it's not even written in the contract for them. And so I think it would only work if you could actually truly enforce it, and I am a pessimist that could happen.
Sure.
So,
Well, do you think, kind of a more macro question on that, tangent there is like, is the deep discounting online retail and the people who are willing to list these products on Amazon and to basically devalue these products, right?
yeah, absolutely.
How is there any value being added by those people? Like, are they worth having, or are they just
Sure.
parasites on the industry?
So there's absolutely 100%. So anybody that's running their businesses like that way, and they choose to have their model set up like that way, good on them. They're not breaking any laws. They're not doing anything illegal. That's the way that they've chose to engage in business. It's not. When I got into this business, I didn't get into this business because I wanted to sell. I wanted to send boxes to somebody's mailbox. I got into it for the face-to-face interaction, for creating experiences for customers, for getting the American family back to the kitchen table playing games again, rather than the wife is up on her iPad and the kids are on their Xbox and they never spend any time together. So, that's what I'm in here for. But I think there's certain people that exist that couldn't afford to be in the hobby if they couldn't get it at that pricing. And there's some people that would say, well, they shouldn't be in that hobby, but I don't think that's fair either. And I think some of it speaks towards, is the price of the product actually what it should be worth, or is it less? So I don't look at them as parasites as much as they're a challenge, or there's something different. They're doing business in a different way. I certainly wouldn't want them to look at the way that I was doing business and say, well, you're just, why would you try to run your business this way without discounting everything? You can't compete.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely don't think it's your place to tell them how to do their business, but at the same time, it's like the overall net effect of them in the industry like that ends up, and I'm not positing that this is the case.
Yeah,
but
sure.
One of the arguments you hear a lot is they do that, and then that makes it harder for local retail stores to exist, which means they go out of business, which means there's not the community. Yeah, Patrick's ready to roll. What do you got on this?
Oh, I would just say, I guess the way I look at it is they are not pariahs, but I do look at them as my actual competitors, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They are the real forces that I am competing against in the market, versus the store that's down the street or whatever. That is the real competitor that I'm fighting against, and that's why experiential retail and all those things are so important, because that's what I have to offer, and I have to show that value to the customer, because they're my real competitor.
Well, we should address the underlying question here, I think, which is, does this hobby survive without the local game store?
I don't think so, and I don't think so because if I take a look, and I believe my publishing partners when they say retail stores and retail outlets that are introducing customers to our games are critical to our success, and I believe that, and I hear it from the leaders as far as publishers go in our industry. I don't think that the game industry, especially at this size, is around without a physical outlet for somebody to come and enjoy games. They can watch you guys' unboxing videos and see your experiences and stuff, and that's as much of a benefit to me as it is to any customer that watches it too, because I'm trying to sell the stuff and I don't have time to read rule books and stuff. So your videos are a lot easier for me to take in when I'm eating lunch. So when I look at the way that they're going about their business and the way that I'm going about, they've made me better. I've had to get better at retailing. I had to offer better things. But I think there's probably a balance there. There's and there's a certain amount of online selling that I think is okay. And I'm of the reality that if the people that are doing online sales weren't doing it, somebody else would be doing those online sales. So I think that because of the way that the market works now, there's an expectation there. It isn't great for me all the time. But yeah, would the industry survive without anybody that I've talked to at any professional level that does this thing well, and I get to talk to a lot of people in the position that I'm in, without a doubt agrees, whether it's retail, distribution, publishing. Without FLGS, what do we have? And I think there's probably other industries where you could take a look at on the experiential side where they just won't stand up. It's different when you look at something like the impact that Netflix has had on movie theaters, right? So it's similar. We're in an entertainment industry and things like that. Movie theaters are having a hard time right now because of the impact that Netflix has, where they have exclusive shows and you don't have to leave your couch and you click a button and it's right there, and it's probably cheaper than a movie ticket. And as those windows of how soon they're available in those formats get shorter and shorter and shorter, the motivation to go out for a night and pay for a $9 bag of popcorn and a $15 ticket goes down. Now, I'm a quality guy, so I want to see it in IMAX for $25 the night of release, So that's my deal.
And I think this touches on one of the most important topics in tabletop, I think, which is, the thing about tabletop that makes it so different than the movie theater, right, is that I can watch a movie at home by myself.
Yep.
I can go to the movie theater and watch it, but it is an inherently me and the entertainment experience, right? Whereas if we were here playing a game of Destiny, the experience is here, right, between us, and you need other people. And so I think that's where, it's funny, but that's the value of tabletop games. To me, that's where most of the value exists. And also, as a retailer, I think that starts handing when you're telling me about what's working for you and what you're telling me works for you. There is a human element to this.
Absolutely.
And the thing that the online retailers, even the deep discount ones, right, they're competing on price.
Yep.
That is the one thing. It's like they've got inventory and they've got low prices. Whereas local retailers like you, right, what can you do different to gain competitive advantages or to add value? And so much of that, to me, comes back to leveraging the human component. And when the whole industry is kind of, the nucleus of it is the human interaction anyway, it makes a whole lot of sense that that would be one of the chief competitive advantages that a local store can offer.
Sure. I think the benefit that we have right now in the space that we are is just the generation that's getting into gaming. And for a long time we had boomers that were like big into collecting. They collected coins, they collected comics, so on and so forth. If I look at the generation behind my generation, which I'm a Xennial, so if I look at the millennials and stuff, everything that they do is actually experiential, right? It's no longer do I have this coin? Do I have this card? It's, do I have a picture of me doing this thing on my Facebook page or my Instagram to catalog that? Well, the benefit is selling boxed games. Every time they open it up, that's a brand new experience. And the other side of it too is, for as digitally connected as we are, if you look at studies, there's actually a level of loneliness that's out there.
Incredible.
Which is so silly because we have so many of these mechanisms to be able to talk and communicate with each other and so on and so forth, and there's all these different modes. So there's definitely a value in being able to have a hub space for people to come and to do that. Now you can do that at bars, at game nights, and you can do that in your basement with your friends and stuff like that. But eventually, maybe you want to get outside of your comfort zone or you want to experience something a little bit different and things like that. And I think socially we're struggling with what that balance looks like. I mean, I know that the shift in games that I sell more of now are definitely social experiences, narrative experiences. There's a compelling reason why there's a story being told on the table, and the direction that the customer's taken in the games that we're selling now definitely dictates, this is what they want, for sure. A legacy experience is a perfect example of that, right? One of the fastest growing sections in the store.
Idea.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, and just like games that offer a unique kind of one-time experience. I remember the first time I heard about Time Stories.
Yep.
I was like, I love this.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that are focused, I think, inherently on either value or price.
Yep.
Where it's like, I'm not paying that much money for a game I can play once.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm the exact opposite, right? I'm the guy at the IMAX paying $25 to see Star Wars in IMAX. And
Sure.
it's like, give me, even if it's 0.5% better, give me the experience.
Well, so
right?
what am I going to do? I'm going to take that Time Stories thing, and I'm going to plug in the new adventure into my cartridge, and I'm going to look at it, and if I really take my dollars and cents and I divide it up, is it cheaper for me to go and get 2 lift tickets and go skiing? Is it cheaper for me to go out and have dinner and a movie? Even if I'm going to experience it one time, I'm only going to experience that evening one time.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, at the end of it, you've got the meal that you're going to digest, and you've got the experience for seeing the show. At least with something that's a legacy game or something like Time Stories specifically, you've still got that thing. You can go back through it again, or you can hand it along to somebody else that wants to go through that as well.
Or you have the core components that allow you to buy expansions to do
more things.
Next thing, or the refill packs.
Well, I mean, and you've seen like Jamie from Stonemeyer Games with the Charterstone. So now you go through this great legacy experience, and then you've still got a full game there.
It's
not ended.
Awesome, by the way. I love that. Like
you
build the
reset,
game,
so it's got all the.
By far one of the brightest people in our industry as far as being able to deal with that stuff.
So given that, like the whole human component seems to be one of the critical elements of all of this, how much does that turn your model into a more event-oriented model? Have you done that, Patrick?
Absolutely.
Has that been your experience?
It's just that was really the big shift. If you want to talk about as new ownership came into the company, the shift that the new owners brought in, the young owners, was we need to be more experiential retail. We need to be more about events. A lot of our stores that are in malls, we don't even have event space inside the store. Instead, we have the space out in the mall.
Oh, that's great.
And so, like, for example, I can seat, like, I have a Destiny Regional this weekend, and we'll seat, like, 120 people, and almost all of those people are actually out in the mall. Right? We have stanchions set up and everything.
That activity
and the food court's, like, right there, and, like, so that's a perfect example. So, yeah, we're very focused now on that. And you can also see it in that we're in malls, and it used to be that fourth quarter and Christmas is where all the money was made, and that we have to shift, right, to where that money needs to be made up year round, because now fourth quarter, most people are just picking it up off of Amazon. So yeah, it's absolutely about the events and the experience. We've also, I remember like we'll run like Magic pre-releases, and we'll take over. One of our malls has a stage, and we'll take over the stage, and we're doing like announcements from the stage, and we are dividing players into, whether it's clans or houses or whatever they're doing for that Magic set. And so they have that sense of like, I'm part of this, and they help each other on their team. That kind of stuff we really love to do because it just adds to the experience. We really want experiential retail. And so that's how we compete. That's something that no online retailer can give you, is the Facebook post and the tweet and the like, I was here and I was part of this thing that happened. But yeah, it's still a challenge, because one of the biggest challenges, I'm sure Travis faces this as well, is all of those things cost something other than money. They cost time. And so when I look at my event calendar and I'm looking at my days of the week, I mean, one of my assistant managers just said last week, he's like, we really just need to add an 8th day to the week.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Like,
event day.
Yeah. So that's actually an interesting new challenge as retailers have to shift into that, is like, every single publisher and every single game is vying for time more than anything else.
Well, so it used to be, right? They're trying to get on our shelves.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to get on our shelves, and they're trying to get on our event calendar. You know, in the publishers that were early adapters of let's run events, and this is the way that we're gonna, you know, in the collectible space specifically, they've already locked down so many days of the week. So the new entrants to it have to come in, and they have to be able to give me a good enough reason to be able to do that. You know, and look at maybe potentially dividing up my player space. But what it's done too, because events are kind of an expectation, retail stores that are coming to the market, people that are deciding to open now, have to have that in their mind. So stores in general are getting to be a little bit larger, and with collectible card games not being as easy as they used to be, and the fighting for a magic dollar is that much harder, they've had to diversify too. So there were stores a couple of years ago that were making a bunch of money on Magic that decided, okay, we're going to expand, we're going to move, we need a larger play space and stuff. Right now, some of those stores are hurting because Magic isn't just where it was. The ones that are going to be able to shift into a more diverse thing, where they're going to offer RPG nights, and they're going to offer miniature nights, and they're going to offer board gaming and things like that, and they find a way to monetize that space, they're going to do really well in this environment. You know, where they've kind of put all their investment into one side of it, and now what are we going to do? Are we either going to get out, or are we going to be able to shift to do this other stuff well as well? So yeah, events are critical.
Really interesting you say that, Travis, because one of the things that like Uncle's old ownership was founded on was this idea that like we can never be dependent on Magic or any other title. And it really happened because Uncle's were around in 1978.
Sure.
They saw the Chronicles crash.
Yes.
Right? Yep. That happened. And they said, okay, that's like, they watched all their other retailers die.
Yeah.
During that, as long ago as that was. And they said, okay, we can never be dependent on one thing. And so that's one of the advantages that I had coming into Uncle's, is I do have these older owners who have seen what came before.
When I came in, Pokemon had just crashed. Beanie Babies had just crashed, and D20 was on its way out.
Yep.
And we had walls and walls and walls of all of that stuff. You know, so being able to go, and there was just this, and it happens. It's a cyclical thing. It's a cyclical nature of the industry. There's a winnowing that occurred. You know, a bunch of stores kind of went away. Some stores had to reinvent themselves and become something different. You know, because you have to be able to adapt to that. And if you're so set up into just one space, a lot of times you don't have the mobility to be able to do that. And this place shifts like that.
Very quickly.
You know?
So, you know, you guys, I think we've all seen a certain amount of shifting sands in the tabletop industry. What do you think are some of the changes you kind of expect to see in the future? And I can go ahead. I was going to say, I can start if you need time to think about it.
No, it's fine. Well, definitely the big change, that's one I've like been really excited about, is the growth of streaming. You guys are doing that. Lots of other people are kind of waking up to that. Even the publishers are waking up to it, but these groups like Geek and Sundry with Critical Role and like Hyper RPG and all those guys are kind of like waking up to this idea that like streaming is really a new part of that experiential thing, and it is definitely driving sales in our stores. And because of that, RPG, which has really been dormant for 20 years, is suddenly reawakening and growing. And so that's been a really cool, fun change. Now, RPG is a very small part of the market, but it's cool to watch that growth. And you're starting to see, with like legacy games and everything, other games try to find ways to tap into that. How does it, like 5 years ago, no publisher ever thought about how do my components look on screen?
Top down.
Sure. Yeah. And now
that's fascinating.
That's a big thing. Like, it really matters.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing that's coming, or is already here and is going to continue to grow. Yeah, and I'm curious to see what that looks like, because esports is blowing up, and so
it's interesting. So internally, we've had those discussions, and the problem is you guys are too good at what you do, right?
You talking about us?
Yeah. so I look around and I look at the quality of the store that I run, and I look at the videos and stuff that Rodney's releasing on Watch It Played. I look at the stuff that Geek and Sundry's doing. I look at the stuff that you guys are doing, and I can't put my brand on something now that's only going to be done to this level.
Sure.
You know, and you guys have found ways, you know, through the subscriptions and the tokens and stuff where you can leverage the views, right? So when we look at it internally, if I were to get into that space, number one, I want to do it at a production level that's going to be reflective of what we do and the rest of the stuff that we do. And then I have to have a way where if somebody's in Sandusky watching my stuff, what's the reason I'm doing that? You know, is it to propel the level of popularity of my local players? But if I don't have some kind of a hook where I can monetize that, I'm putting a lot of money into, you know, editing and all that stuff. If I don't have some way that I can find some value in that, and you know, the person that's watching the video or watching the stream from Russia, like, that's not going to be a potential customer for me. And we talked about it. I don't have an online component. So it's not like they can look at that game and then buy that. So I'd have to build in the infrastructure for that. So I look around and, well, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. What we see I mean, I watch Twitch almost every day. Like, I'm a big MOBA viewer. So I see that stuff all the time.
But I think the interesting part of that is, you know, like you were saying earlier with online retail, even like the mass, you know, deep discounters, using that as, you know, a force that for good for you.
Yeah.
Where it's like, even now, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, it was back before YouTube and before forums and before you could get this information online. And so, like, you know, there could very well be a customer in New York that is watching our video, learning how to play.
Without a doubt.
And can come in, because the reality is, like, what, you know, we can't do is be a physical location in New York for them,
Absolutely.
right? And offer the human component, which we believe in, like, in our DNA, right? And so, you know, as for us, you know, it's really interesting because we grew up and the stores were very Magic focused, and we never really played Magic.
Sure.
And so a big part of why we do subscriptions, or, you know, all the content we're creating to help people get into these games, is just that idea of, like, it was so hard for us to get into these games and then actually have community around them. So for people that play the stuff we're covering that don't have stores, right, it's like we're a gold mine.
Absolutely.
But I think that local stores can use that.
Sure,
absolutely.
Where, like,
I use it all the time.
I bet you have TVs in your store.
Yeah, I do. You guys are
So
and, like,
awesome.
your videos get sent through to my staff, and sometimes it's
That's
required
so funny.
watching. So,
So
yeah,
cool.
you guys train my guys all the time, and you train my
I'm
customers too.
super frowny faced when I find a really good stream that has a bunch of cussing, because I'm like, I really
Yeah,
want to
I
put
really-
you up on my store,
I'd love to do that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I can't because it's a family focused store, you know.
Yeah.
But as far as training videos and stuff like that, I'll send that through. So yeah, the work you guys do and other people in the industry that do that grow that outside of that, there's definitely people that have found me because of the stuff that you guys cover.
awesome to
Without
hear.
a
That's
doubt.
so good to hear.
You know,
Yeah.
but
Awesome.
for me to take a swing at that, like, I have to be able to do it. So I have to figure this stuff out. Like, I don't have any of this equipment.
I think you know, if I was just a retailer and we weren't, you know, doing the way we're doing what we're doing, which we have a totally different, you know, thing going on, but it makes a lot of sense that the local stores, like you, both of you, wouldn't invest in that kind of a play. But at the same time, and it's interesting, you know, having the TVs or using it as, you know, train your staff or whatever, because, like, the local store, I heard some talks here, even people being like, "Are you streaming?" And it's like, I'm not sure that's where they can offer the most value.
It really depends. If you have if you have somebody on staff, or you have a part-timer that's educated as far as streaming and that kind of stuff goes, it makes things a lot easier. If I got to go out into the world and find somebody to be able to do that doesn't have some interest or hasn't played around with it before, that's a lot more expensive thing to go to. So yeah, I could probably invest in a new line.
I spent 3 years trying to find that guy, and I finally found that guy, but it
takes a while.
Took a while, yeah.
That's so funny. So do you, you know, Patrick's saying basically he thinks streaming is going to become even more prevalent, or
I think it is
content.
already impacting and will continue to impact and change our industry.
I heard it called T-Sports for the first time today.
I
Instead
did
of
too.
esports, T-Sports. It's like,
Yeah, that's funny.
Okay.
Travis, do you have anything in particular that you're kind of expecting on the horizon for tabletop gaming?
So I would say it's hard to predict a segment. I said I think we see these things kind of come and go, and they sit around, and some of them do okay. So like if I were to bring myself through the paces of what we've seen where people have tried to innovate on the retail side of things, I think escape rooms are kind of this thing that we all saw kind of flood into the market, and anybody that had a box was trying to do that and stuff. And some of them will last, and some of them will be around, and then I think some of that will fade. I think the cafe model is interesting. We've seen some of those. We've seen a lot more of them fail than we've seen succeed. So there's another space for that. But as far as certain product, and the new thing that I'm seeing a lot in my area is these VR rooms. So they're doing the virtual reality rooms are coming up and stuff. And I mean, virtual reality has been something that we've been hearing since the early 90s and stuff. But to me, when I look at that model, I can buy one of those things and sit in my living room just like everything else, and it's not very expensive.
Once it becomes
so
cost effective enough.
Yeah, so unless they have a specific game or a reason why I'm going there, and they have some kind of exclusivity, I just don't see that being a viable thing. But for a little while, somebody's going to make some money on that. I just look at where we're headed, and every year I look at the slate of games that comes out, and they get better and better and better, and they get closer to what my needs are. I mean, Star Wars Legion hits. Like, I've been wanting to play a Stormtrooper army for a million years. Even so far as going up
Dreams
and
do come true.
painting Space Marines.
Like a
Stormtrooper. So what am I going to do? So now I get to play, Legion with Darth Vader and equipping force powers that I want to put on him. So
totally.
Yeah, it's all the stuff. Like, we're in this embarrassment of wealth where it's just crazy amounts of really high quality stuff. So I can have even a store as big as mine and only put A+ titles on my shelf, and having that as a benefit, like in going down to the floor and looking at the new stuff that's coming out, it's not slowing down. Each of the publishers that makes quality products puts more pressure on the next one in line to continue to make quality products. So I'm not worried about it from the perspective of, will I have a good enough thing to be able to show a customer that they're going to be interested and excited to buy?
Which was not the case.
No.
In a lot of times in tabletop gaming.
No.
Kind of slim
there were definitely some times when when I started, it wasn't uncommon to see maybe 6 new board games come out for a month. And I'd be able to read about them and
now you got
review
6
and
a
play.
day.
Now,
on just Kickstarter.
So last year, I sold 965 new board games, at least 1 copy of. So almost 3 new games a day. That doesn't count the ones that I passed on, and that doesn't count the ones that I didn't sell that I brought in. So that's a lot of opportunity, but it's also a lot of chance for failure too. So like when I look at my online peers and I think about what they have to deal with. So as we talked about, their benefits, right, are their shipping, their supply, and their pricing. The expectation is that they have to have everything. Now, most of the consumers that are educated come into my store and realize if they're asking for a one-off of this esoteric game, I'm probably not going to have it on my shelf. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I cannot imagine the amount of pressure that they're dealing with, given the amount of releases that they're getting.
The warehouse space.
And we just saw that FunAgain.com is now just going back to retail. And they were one of the most successful online retailers for years and years and years. And they've made the decision, even as well and as innovative as they did it, to decide, we're going to keep our retail space and we're going to get rid of our online space. That's a statement.
Yeah.
That really tells you where you're at, because it's not like they didn't know what they were doing. They were a little bit higher priced, but they also offered some stuff that some of the other online guys did. They sourced a lot of product through Essen and stuff and brought things over that other people didn't have and curated that stock. But eventually, something's got to give from that, or you got to have this outlet, So I don't envy their position right now, even though they can price what they can price.
That makes a lot of sense, because as the industry grows and the quality of games has gone through the roof, I think the consistency of the quality has gone through the roof.
Absolutely.
As a mass, online retailer, that is a challenge. There's a lot of titles happening, inventory stock, and if you overbet on the wrong things too often, that's just a wreck. Did you have something you were going to
I was just going to say, connected to exactly almost what you just said, is just that I think that one of the shifts I'm definitely seeing, we in the ICV2 seminar, we saw how 3 years ago, it was 10-15% growth. And then last year it was 5% growth. That's still growth, but it's not the growth that we saw. And I think what I am seeing is a lot of the publishers are cutting more of the chaff. So a lot more of the board games where they're maybe not, take the risk. You're seeing those kind of get cut.
Because they can't have a miss.
Yeah, you can't have the miss as much. And so even one of the publishers, yesterday in their keynote was like, last year we released a ton of titles. We're not doing that this year. And they were bragging about that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, they would have bragged the opposite direction.
Right.
Like, look at all these titles we're releasing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also why the quality is going on, because now that they're starting to cut that chaff, we're only getting really good games in stores.
It makes sense too when you have very few games coming out. If a mediocre game comes out, it's like, well, I want something new to play.
Right.
But now it's like a mediocre game comes out, it's like, I'm not buying it.
I've got 20 other options.
I've got all the other options.
That's the other
Yeah.
shift. That's the big shift that's happening as we bring in new audiences, the gateway gamer, the people who really only experience in the entertainment industry is what? It's video games, it's comic books, it's movies. And how do those industries work? They work by what is the new, they walk into their stores, they walk in the movie theater to see the newest, latest thing. And so what you're seeing also big time in the industry is you have games that everybody's tweeting about, everybody's Facebooking about. It's the most important, best thing for 2 weeks, and then it just kind of goes
Fades
away.
away.
Yeah.
And I think that hints at what I think is one of the biggest shifts that I'm expecting in the next 5 or 10 years, which is tabletop gaming's growing up. And what
a
I mean,
real industry.
it's a real industry, right?
Real
'Cause, like,
entertainment industry.
There's no money, a lot of money in the industry.
and I think part of growing up, there's going to be a lot of shifts happening. And I think there's a fair number of stores that are going to have to either change or figure some things out. But on the publisher distribution level, it's like you're talking about movies and akin to movies. And it's like movies also and comic books have another thing, which is, what's coming out. They're marketed months in advance.
Absolutely.
They have release dates.
This is the thing I wanted in the industry. Like when I first showed up in this industry, I was like, what are we doing? Like, why are there not street dates? Why are there not...
Still ask that question every day.
How can I not log onto a website like IGN or something and like read previews and be like, this is coming out in 3 months? Like, why is that a thing that doesn't exist for this industry? Now I understand why it exists like 6 years later, but when I first showed up, I was like, it's a mess.
But I hypothesize that the publisher that figures that out
Oh, absolutely.
will dominate.
Absolutely.
Like the first publisher that can consistently market a product leading up to the release, have a set date, and hit it.
Yeah.
Deliver.
They will be every retailer in the world's favorite person, and they will be, I think, just disproportionately successful because of what the retailers can then do.
And I think there are publishers, a lot of our publishers are owned by very smart people, and I think they're aware of that, and they're trying to get there.
Yeah.
So what's interesting though is like, if you look at something from the entertainment perspective, and Marvel just bumped up one of their movie releases because they looked at the release calendar and they know what movies are coming out as far as like a year or 2 years in advance and roughly when it is. So they're not going to put their big hot release on top of it. In our industry, it doesn't go that much because everybody kind of identifies exactly when that hot time is going to be. Okay, let me release at Origins. Let me release at Gen Con. Let me release at Essen. Those are kind of the 3 big things. And everybody tries to release on that because that's when there's the most eyes and the most views and the most buzz. And like, from a media perspective, I can't imagine trying to cover all that newness. Like you guys do a good job at Gen Con going around and kind of sourcing that stuff out. But man, there's, I'm there every year and like trying to get through that hall to look at all the new stuff. And,
Well, and as we mentioned, it's getting harder
Yeah.
because there's more of that stuff.
curation.
Yeah.
More important
absolutely.
than ever.
Like our first Gen Con was 2008, and it was like, we went through the hall in like an hour.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a limited amount of things that are worth checking out.
Right.
I think I
past year-
saw a number like 3 years ago. So this would be Gen Con, like what, 2015-ish? They said there were more titles on the floor at Gen Con 2015 than total titles that were on the floor from 2000 to 2010.
I would believe
So like,
that, yeah.
like that's insane. Like that's
Yeah, since we are at GAMA, I do want to ask the specialty kind of retailer question.
Sure.
So, we've been talking about the retail store adapting and how that is a necessity. And I think we all agree at this point, LGS is going to survive, but it certainly is going to look different over the next 10 years than the classic models that you've seen in the past 15, right?
Yep.
So what about the kind of traditional model? We've heard it called the 3-tier model here at GAMA, publisher to distributor to regional, retail stores. Is that also something that needs to adapt? Is the distribution idea with so much like direct fulfillment and things going on like that, where does that fit into this puzzle over the next 10 years as well?
So I think it's interesting, right? So I just came from New York Toy Fair a couple of weeks ago, and the toy industry model was case count well in advance. A lot of times your salesperson was the one that put your quantities for your store. You weren't direct dictating, it was your rep. And And obviously we've seen what's going on with, Toys R Us going bankrupt and that's analog play that's kind of going out the window and being replaced by digital, if I had to guess. So I think that's a pretty telling thing as to what we can expect for the kids that we might be seeing. So
In 20 years.
yeah, where are they going to be? Are they going to be more digitally focused, or are they going to be more analog focused? So when I look at that 3-tier system, the benefit of distribution is I can order in 1s and 2s. I don't have to go real deep on something, and I can kind of dabble. And if it sells really well, I can order again. There's ways where it breaks down where if they overorder, they have to have exhaust ports to get rid of that product too. And a lot of times when we see value go down in a game or something that kind of just they had to get rid of it. They had to get out from underneath it, and they're working on the thinnest margins in the entire industry. But I mean, for us, we've moved to more direct ordering, direct relationships with publishers, even publishers that, have Kickstarter games but don't have a retail level. I've found in my experience, if you reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a retailer that'd love to carry your game, what can we do? How can we make this happen?
Sure.
I need to order a case. Okay, cool. I just want to be able to do that. So I think the industry by itself breaks down pretty hard if we don't have distribution, because the size and the scale of most stores are not in a way where they can be healthy enough to carry a case of all games.
Yeah.
So they have to kind of be that box deliverer. And with free shipping and the different things that they offer, it just makes it easier. If I had to call every single publisher that I order product from weekly from a distributor, it'd be 150 phone calls a week. It's just untenable. So they're critical, they're crucial to that. A lot of the reasons why we have problems in the industry stem from them, and a lot of the solutions stem from them too. So it's just how good of a steward are they going to be in terms of what they do? Do they have any deals that are set up where there's an unfair advantage for some buyer versus another buyer? And all that's gray stuff. There's speculation on how some of that thing goes, and different stuff that we see constantly. So it's a challenge. Without distribution, my store wouldn't be where it is. I need distribution, and most of the stores I know couldn't function without distribution. There are things that could definitely be better in that tier for sure.
Yeah. What about you, Patrick?
I'm the wrong person to ask.
Or maybe the right person.
Maybe
to
the
ask.
right person. Well, we're unique. So like, if a case pack is 6 and I have 5 stores and I bring it into my warehouse, because we have a warehouse, that's 1 copy to each store and 1 copy that sits in the warehouse. So it's kind of a unique situation. And so our product line is broken up into, we actually have 2 buyers, and 1 buyer handles through distributors and 1 buyer handles everything direct. And we also handle a lot of Jigsaw and that kind of stuff, which we go direct. For a long time, Hasbro used to be direct.
Yep.
And so for us, it's a little bit weird, but distributors definitely add value in that they can be the ones, our buyers only have so much time. If they can be the ones paying attention to the trends that are going on in the industry and be informative and helpful and bring almost the same kind of value that we bring to customers, they're bringing to us.
Yeah.
That is really what has made us loyal to certain distributors and certain people, is because they are making us make more money, is really what it comes down to.
Sure. But I mean, that's part of the same problem that customers face with 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 games coming out a year.
Right.
And the retailer can say, here's what we think is great.
Yep.
And part of the value that would make sense that a distributor could also offer is that same step to you,
right? Kind of
because
thing.
instead
like,
of
this is going to be,
I think in
and
the
that
90s,
would save me a ton of time, because it's impossible to.
So it's super challenging though, right? So they not only do they have to decide who they're going to bring in and what amounts they're going to bring in, but they also have to have 400 interviews with potential publishers here and decide what they're going to do. So then their rep looks at the catalog of 40,000 SKUs, and expecting them to be educated on all of them is a little bit difficult. So I certainly have reps in the industry that are order takers that just take my PO and then they put it in the system. And then I have other reps that have, some level of acumen in a certain area. So I flex that to a degree. One of my reps is a really, really well known in miniatures. So if I have miniatures questions, I will ask him specifically, and I'll let him play around with some of my numbers if you think it's low. But it doesn't always happen that way. I mean, most of the time there's so many calls coming in, and there's so many products that they have to be proficient at, that them to be that arm of my business would be lovely, but most of them can't.
Tough.
I think that's the
Because they're
trick,
already
though,
thin
right?
on the margins, like
That's
you said, right?
it.
I think that's the trick, though, is like there's a potential space for a distributor who could do that.
Yeah.
Which is, if there was one that was doing that, I think you would order from them a lot more. often.
Sure,
Consistently,
but if they're going to do that, then they'd have to do what I do in my store, which is curate, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't. So then they lose the advantage of, well, so if one of them made the decision, these are the lines that we're carrying, we're not getting outside of that, and what we're going to do is we're going to be lean, and we're just going to educate our staff on how to sell those products better. That's an interesting concept to do.
That is interesting.
Without the idea of, with as many Kickstarter publishers that are coming in that are kind of disrupting the space, which is great, it gets challenging all the time because you don't know who the new hot publisher is going to be. And from there's going to be a lot of chaff, but there's going to be some good quality there too. And if you set up yourself to say, okay, I'm only carrying these lines and they're good, they've got to be really good lines. They got to be high turning stuff. They can't have a lot of chaff and dead stuff on the back end of the catalog. So I think it would be an interesting position for a distributor to decide to take that and say, listen, we're only working with these 30 publishers, but we're going to know it pat.
Yeah. Interesting.
That'd be pretty wild. All right. So final question here before we move on to the Ask Covenant section. Looking ahead, we talked about changes and stuff, but I'd love to know what gets you excited when you think about the future of tabletop gaming.
Patrick, you want to start?
What gets me excited when I think about the well, I mean, talking about generationally, I'm just really excited about growing a generation on board gaming. Like, it's super fun to now start to see kids who came into my store, when they were teenagers and now they're adults, and now, you kind of have that second generation coming in. The way that we are so connected online has left this gap of things to do where we are not looking at our screen, right? And so I'm kind of excited to see what that looks like. I'm excited to see what technology does bring to board gaming. I'm excited about, I know a lot of people hate this, but I'm excited to see the kinds of things where digital and physical are interacting and doing things together. There's games like Weave, I think, that gets that really, really well. And so I think there's a lot of potential in the future. But I don't know. It's also a little tenuous. I am actually fearful. I'm totally twisting your question in the wrong direction. I'm fearful for
Yeah, I was like, wait a second, this is not exciting.
smaller retailers, and specifically for the guy right now who has the dream. So that's the kind of the backside. The front side is that I think we're getting more professional. I think we will see what you're describing with street dates, and I mean the dream is the television ad for the board game or whatever, right? I think we could potentially be moving in that direction, but there is a cost to that, and the cost of that is what's so cool about the local game store industry is there's a lot of people that are downstairs that just had a dream, and they started a store and they started it small and then they grew it bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I'm worried about what that gateway looks like and whether it's that door is closing. And so that would be the
give and take.
The bitter pill of that, I guess you could say.
Yeah. What about you, Travis?
So I just think that the amount of opportunity that we have now, because the quality of our products are so good, to be able to take it more mainstream, for people to be able to look at the stuff that we have, and it's not just people in a basement eating Cheetos all day. We're out in front and center. But still, if I were to walk out of this casino, well, maybe not this casino, but a casino anywhere else, and ask somebody if they know the game Ticket to Ride, the majority of the people would say no. So for me as a retailer, that's a tremendous amount of opportunity where I can still touch people and introduce them to this world. And we haven't even touched, we haven't scratched the surface when it comes to that. Now, people will have certain touch points where there are games that'll come in and shift the needle when it comes to that kind of thing. But there's so much potential to be able to show people this world and what you can do in the different places that you can go. And I think the most important part of it is it's all about entertainment and having a good time. I sell people the break that they get from their 9 to 5, Here's the enjoyment. I get the opportunity to bring that to them. And there's not a lot of industries that you get to do that for, so that feels good. Like Patrick said, I am concerned about retailers that kind of just dip their toes in and take kind of a fast and loose approach to it too, because even the smaller stores in my local community, I need those guys, right? So I'm a big giant store and I have a huge gravity and people come from hours away to check out my place and stuff. But I need the smaller stores too, because I can't be everything and anything to all the customers, even in my local area. You know, I'm not going to be the thing that they want. So the other guy's going to be there. They're going to create gamers, but I have a big event space. So, and I get the opportunity to run regionals and things like that. So I need them creating gamers just as much as they need me creating gamers. You know, so without the whole of it, the small, medium, and large retailer, I think there's an amount that it collapses too, because some people do want to just go to the smaller, you know, more boutique store, shop around, feel good about that, have a personal relationship with this person, and go about their day. But I would agree 100%. The amount of stores in the industry right now that are making, you know, that are putting through more than $500,000 in sales on an annual basis has increased significantly in the last 4 or 5 years. You know, so our level of professionalism has gone up. When you walk into a store now, what you're going to see as far as fixtures and carpeting and that kind of thing, bathrooms, it's getting closer to what you would see in a regular retail space. It doesn't quite have the same perception. Not that those stores don't still exist, but the number of stores out there that are high quality stores has gone up exponentially, which is only good for the better stores out there as well, as far as looks goes, because our perception has changed now too. As we've gotten mainstream, we've had to present a mainstream retail approach as well.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so we've had to grow along with that. So.
Well, and I think for me,
I want to say one other thing I thought of, because you got me off guard.
Sorry about you.
And this is dangerous, but sometimes I like to go into dangerous territory.
Yeah.
Another thing that really excites me about our industry is that right now I feel like there is a lot of division in our country. And one of the things I really love about gaming is you get a lot of different people with different backgrounds who get that human-to-human interaction. And I have watched like literal peacekeeping happen in game stores. I grew up in games and stuff, and when Ed owned that store.
Yeah.
And so I watched as different kinds of people would sit at tables, and they would never have sat at those tables and known each other and had human relationship.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that really excites me, is that local game stores have a power that is cultural, that can have an impact on the country, honestly. And so that's another part that actually really excites me, is being that kind of peacekeeper.
I think, to speak to that, it has a power that I think can, not just the country, I think it's the world.
Yep.
And I think kind of tying those two together is what gets me really excited, which is I've always, ever since I was a kid, had a passion for tabletop games, and I think that they really are powerful, and they do something special that I've not seen anything else really accomplish. And one of the dreams for us, and one of the big reasons we started in the very beginning, is we had this awesome thing, and we knew it was awesome. And we felt like everyone who was dealing with it wasn't respecting it. And that lack of respect meant there were a lot of people that weren't getting to experience tabletop games. Sure. And so as this transition is being made, I am excited, because I think that all the stuff you were saying is true. And ultimately, in the next 5 or 10 years, I hope that tabletop games do reach a lot more people, because I think that's ultimately just going to make the world a better place.
Sure.
So
I think that's happening.
all right, well,
You can, by the way, because I have this whole other alternate life that exists in Uganda. If you can ever figure out a way for like tabletop to be impacting Africa, like I'm on board. Because I often think about it, and I'm just like, what are the ways?
I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think tabletop
if there's people
games
viewing,
are
they're
universal.
like, hey, I have an idea that I'm like, I would love to hear it, because
But I mean, that's the cool part, right? Is like you could sit down with people from Uganda and
you
play
just
a
mentioned
game.
the world, and I was like, yeah, no, we taught English using Quiddler. Like Quiddler
that's
was
great,
like
yeah.
how we taught English in the
That's-
vocational school.
That's so cool.
A lot of
Which
potential.
at first they were like, this is a game. This is not proper schooling. But then they like got used to it and they loved it, right? But it was interesting, that first cultural impact of like using a game to teach English. Yeah.
That's fascinating. The games are powerful.
Yeah,
They're
they
very
are.
powerful tools. All right, so we like to close out the show by asking you, the listener/watcher of this, a question. The question I would love to know is, where's your favorite place to play games and why? Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep playing.